So one of my favorites that I like to use is the argument that we have to think of. Let's think of ourselves as thinkers, right? As knowers. We
Okay.
human beings, we aim to have knowledge of the world. And when we go to experience the world, because the world is basically the object of knowledge. That is what we aim to know. And
Sure.
the world has different objects and facts in it. And when we experience the world, what we experience is characterized by diversity and change and plurality. So, for example, there are many apples in the world. For example, there are many shoes. So we experience various things. And so if we are to analyze what it means to know something and what must be the case for us to be able to know things, we have to see that human knowledge presupposes system. And here's what I mean, that for us to know anything, we would have to relate various facts into a system.
Okay.
And so our knowledge presupposes relations between facts. So, for example, you might have one apple and another apple. Those are two different objects, but there is a relation between them. That's the
Okay.
relation of being an apple. Or you can say you might have one event, for example, the striking of a match, then you might have another event, for example, the match catching on fire. And so those are two different events, but there's a relation between causal relation in this case. That is, the striking of the match causes the match to catch on fire. And
Hmm.
so we see that our experience, for it to be coherent, for it to make sense, there has to be various types of relations between facts. We can have causal relations, we can have conceptual relations, we can have logical relation, mathematical relations, even numerical relations. All these types of relations are necessary if our experience is to make sense, if we're to have knowledge. And so, how I'd say is that the question we can ask is what exactly provides the relation between these different facts?
Okay.
I think there are only three possible answers to this question. The relation between facts are either provided by God or by man, or they are just abstractly related out there in the world.
Hmm.
And so, if the relation between facts are provided by the mind of man, then that would mean that all the relationships between the objects are basically illusory. They only exist in our own minds. And so that leads to subjectivism and relativism, because that would imply that in reality there is no relation between one apple and another apple, for example. There is no relation between striking the match and the match catching on fire. What you would have would be various disjointed and unrelated objects
Okay.
if relationships between facts is provided by the mind of man. And so that leads to subjectivism, and subjectivism implies that knowledge is impossible because what you're knowing, you're just knowing your own mind. You're not knowing the world. And as I
Mm.
mentioned, the world is the object of knowledge. And so there's no difference between you and perhaps a schizophrenic, because you're just trapped in your own mind.
Mm.
And so if that makes possible, we can ask, what about if the relationships between facts are provided by something out there in the world? Like it's just abstract, or it's just a brute fact that they are related. Maybe there's an abstract principle that relates all the facts. But in that case, that abstract principle would have to be related to the fact by another abstract principle.
Okay.
And we have an infinite regress on our hands. And in that case, knowledge still becomes impossible because there is no relation between facts. And so the only option that can make knowledge possible is if God, the mind of God, provides the relations, the objective relations between facts. And it is that knowledge, that system, and Him revealing that system to us that makes knowledge possible.